Stationed on his balcony, he performed his daily observation, intensely studying the grimy faces of incoming merchants and cooks and masons and servant girls. In his search for the slightest hint of disloyalty, the tiniest lifting of an eye, someone forgetting to pull on their collar, a person standing fully upright, he noticed for the first time in years 2 men he had never seen before. Caught off guard, he rushed to the edge of the balcony, folded his torso and stretched himself out to get a better look. His eyes did not deceive him. These were, without a doubt, foreigners, with skin whiter than the whitest lily petal, dressed in fine red velvet, collars lined with gray fur, belts with shiny silver plates. They each rode in odd-looking rectangular vehicles, pulled by 2 majestic horses. Vehicles so peculiar, peasants risked their lives by slightly lifting their heads to watch them pass by. The king showed no interest in punishing anyone that day, for at last he could make use of his gift and judge a complete stranger's character in front of his court. With eager eyes he followed their every move. Slowly they approached the front gate, bowing their heads when they caught his gaze. When stopped by the guards, they could be heard clearing their throats and saying in shaky voices, "We must see the king at once. It is a matter of urgency." "No one sees the king without an invitation," said a guard. "What are you saying, you fool?" shouted the king from the balcony. "Let them pass." As the foreigners neared his balcony, the king secured a clearer view of the strange vehicles. Adorned with golden suns and silver rays, and embedded with glimmering rubies, he immediately wanted one for himself. Only his vehicle would have an image of his face with emeralds for the eyes. Rushing down the spiral staircase, chuckling with childlike delight, he scared away the rats and ordered his guards to welcome the strangers into his dining hall. Before he confronted the men, he contained his grin, forcing his mouth into a tight square. He moved with a confident stride, chest jutting out, head held high, and golden crown fitted firmly in his raven locks. "What is this that I hear?" he said with a pompous tone. "This matter of urgency." Just like everyone else in his kingdom, the foreigners avoided eye contact, pulled lightly on their collars, and sustained a quiver in their voices. "Your most royal majesty," said the one with a bald spot, "we have come to warn you." "Warn me of what?" said the king. "Of a great invasion," said the one with 2 bald spots. "Utter nonsense," said the king. "It has been years since I drove out all of my enemies. And besides, my kingdom is surrounded by water. An enemy invasion would be fairly easy to detect." Fur collars came undone as the foreigners continued with their message. "Traitors from within, your majesty," said the first one to speak. "That is clearly the case here." "We come from the lowest part of this world," said the second one. "From down below, we can see how kingdoms rise and how they fall. Those that fall always start with inner grumblings among the common folk, and soon spills over into rebellion. We have come to help you stop the fall of your kingdom before it is too late." "I have a gift, you see," said the king. "A gift of knowing a traitor when I see one. For this very reason, all my remaining subjects are completely loyal to me." "And what of your queen and your sons?" said the first one. "Did they not sit in front of you and lead you to believe that they were loyal?" "How would you know such a thing?" "Perhaps we crossed paths with certain royalty on our journeys," said the second one. "And once we heard of such a tragedy, we came at once to assist you." "Assist me?" I have never needed assistance from anyone." "To be fair, Your Majesty," interrupted his trusted elder, "you have not practiced your skill in such a long time. I don't think livestock and statues count. Perhaps you do need a helping hand." "All right, Bold Spot and Patches," said the king. "Let's say there are traitors in my midst. How would I know who they are?" "Oh, most gracious king," said Bald Spot, hand over heart. "What we are about to say is probably bouncing in your brain ready to spring forth. And we both know it should not be said out loud. Therefore, allow my associate to confirm, in a whisper to your ear, that we are in tune with one another." "Very well," said the king. "Come closer." In a delicate and soft voice, Patches said, "The traitors are the ones who claim there is no invasion." "Aha!" exclaimed the king, causing the foreigners to cringe and to cover their heads as if to ward off a blow. "Exactly my thoughts. I tested you and you passed. This is our specialty, my king," said Bold Spot, arms resting at his sides. "To weed out the most conniving and hidden defectors in your kingdom." "And to prove that we are trustworthy," said Patches, stretching out his arms, "we offer you a carriage, a vehicle reserved for only the greatest king in the world." The king rushed to his trusted elder and twisted his ear, alerting the elder to announce, "Hear ye, hear ye." His most sublime and eloquent king will now address his subjects. "For many years, my most spectacular gift lay as dormant and dry as tinder in a box," said the king in his stately voice. "Today, these two strangers from distant lands come riding in as two pieces of flint, igniting a flame that can never be put out again. My gift burns anew, and it is this very gift that declares unto me these men are clothed in complete loyalty and truth. From this day forward, they are my new trusted advisers." His trusted elder gave a stiff bow and shuffled away, allowing the two strangers to take their place at the king's side. "First order of business," said Patches. "A scout will go out and verify the invasion." When no one moved, the king brought his hands together in one loud clap. "You heard the advisor. We need a scout. Send out a scout." The unfortunate task of scouting was given to a young, scrawny guard, ruddy-faced and bug-eyed. His only instruction was to ride through the land and find the location of the invaders. No heroics were necessary. When he encountered them, he was to immediately return and let the king and the captain know where to find them. Refreshing wind blew through his hair as he rode, adding to the exhilaration already thumping in his heart. Who would believe that a peasant boy was chosen by the king to lead the first mission against invaders? How he wanted to stop in the village and tell his parents and siblings, "Look at me, why don't you? Important I am. Reporting directly back to the king I will be." But he forced himself to keep riding when he saw them working in the wheat field. As their heads tilted down in a perpetual bow, they did not even notice him passing. Village after village, field after field, down valleys and up hills, no invaders ever appeared. The same peasants he had known for years tilled the earth, cut the wheat, collected the crops, herded the goats, and built tables and chairs. When he asked them if they had seen any foreigners, they shrugged their shoulders and said, "If you count those two bald fellows riding in those ridiculous donkey carts as foreigners, then yes, those are not foreigners," he told them. "They're now the advisors of the king." "They looked as foreign as a wart on a cherub's ass," said an old woman. "Not that I was looking, if you know what I mean." "Keep an eye out," he told the old woman and every peasant he questioned. Invaders are in our land, and they must be stopped. He visited both the eastern and western shores, hoping to find enemy ships and coastal villages ransacked and depleted. Instead, he encountered peasants and huts standing in their sad little ways, barely erect, bent in some places, bruised all around, but solid enough to take on the salty wind and the corrosive heat. Both peasant and hut showed no sign of attack. A few ships bobbed in the glimmering green western sea, completely intact, completely controlled by sailors from the kingdom. The lack of disturbances, the shortage of assaults, anchored a hefty frustration on his mind, bringing him down to his knees, in tears. Where did he go wrong? What area did he miss? How could he fail to see a whole army of foreigners? Perhaps, while he was on the eastern shore, the army came through the western shore. Indeed, that was exactly what happened. He had to return immediately to the east. In haste, he rowed to the eastern shore, daring to raise his head for a better look of the countryside. Green valleys, brown fields, poor villages, dirty peasants rolled off his eyes. Where were these damn raiders the advisors warned about? They had to be somewhere. He beat his chest when he arrived at the eastern docks and found everything as calm and normal as its western counterpart. Sailors and peasants again insisted no strangers had passed through their land. With head hung lower than usual, he rode slowly through the palace gates, agonizing about what to tell the king. Invaders fell into a pit, my king, and were eaten by wolves. But then the king would ask for bones and weapons as evidence. So what about, the army did make it to our shores, but when they heard about your power and might, they got in their ships and fled across the sea. Once in the presence of the king, his loyalty pressed him into telling the truth. In front of the king, the two advisors, the captain and elders, with servants and guards standing behind him, he bent the knee and declared, "I come to you as a failure. I searched every part of the kingdom and found no sign of invasion." At these words, the king turned to the advisors, who gave him a long and calculating nod. "Traitor!" shouted the king. "To the dungeon with you, where you will rot away with the rats." "My dear king," said Patches with a bow, "why don't you say what you are really thinking?" "Thinking?" said the king, rubbing his chin. "Yes, your majesty," said Baldspot. "How this man deserves a punishment far worse than imprisonment." "Punishment such as—" said the king. "Torture," said Patches. "You were about to say torture." "Of course I was," said the king. "You never fail us, good king," said Baldspot. "You always know what to do." "Then off to the torture chamber with this vermin," ordered the king. "If we don't hear it screaming, then you are doing a bad job, and you will be put in its place." "Bravo!" cheered his advisors. "Everyone, bravo!" The room erupted with applause and "Long live the king!" A bronze aura gleamed off the king's face as he soaked in the praises and gestures of submission. He was ready for the next order of business. "The elders," said Patches. "Send out the elders. Let them encounter what the scout could not find." Elders, all of them garbed in finely embroidered tunics, with white-trimmed beards and long white hair, filed outside the palace walls, looking out of place among the scabby-skinned field workers and the dung-contaminated roads. He who was the king's trusted elder since the king was a child took the lead. "We don't want to stay among the rabble longer than we have to. I say we go as far as those trees over yonder. No need to go any further." "That's just past the village," said a hunched-over man. "Surely the scout would have seen invaders if they were so close." "Just do as I say," said the trusted elder. As they walked in a straight line, the elders pinched their noses when passing mud-stained children begging for food. "When did we allow such conditions to exist?" asked the shortest elder. "With heads bowed and eyes averted for so long, I suppose we never made the effort to look outside the palace gates," said the hunched elder. "Poor creatures," said the shortest elder, peering back at the hungry children. "They will probably be the first casualties of the oncoming invasion." "Quiet," said the trusted elder. "Our focus should be on finding the enemy. Keep your eyes and ears open. They have to be lurking somewhere nearby." "And what if they are? We have no weapons to defend ourselves. We are too old to run. What will we do if we come upon them?" "That's when we call the peasants," said the trusted elder. "All we have to do is promise them food, and they always willingly die for the upper classes. As they get pounded into dust, we make our escape." Those words gave the elders encouragement to proceed to the trees at the end of the village. And when they arrived, the shortest elder said what all the other elders were thinking. "Trees, and more trees. That's all I see. Absolutely no sign of foreign invaders." A hard slap from the back of the trusted elder's hand almost unhinged the shortest elder's neck. "Shut up, you fool," shouted the trusted elder. "Didn't you see what happened to the scout? Do you want the same to happen to us?" Massaging his pink cheek, the shortest elder said, "Of course not. But am I the only one who sees that we are not under attack?" Wrestling the shortest elder into a headlock, the trusted elder ordered, "Everyone, give this stupid dwarf a good punch in the face." Though some punches were delivered reluctantly, some were executed with great pleasure. Pow, bam, whack. When the elders each had a turn, the trusted elder released the beaten dwarf and let him fall to the ground. "Tell me again, through those swollen eyes of yours, what do you see?" In a strained, battered voice, the shortest elder said, "I see invaders." "That's what we all see, am I right?" said the trusted elder. Elders nodded in unison and offered this same affirmation in front of the king and his advisors. "Yes, my king," said the trusted elder. "The invasion is very close. Enemy troops lay in waiting at the end of the closest village." "Enemy troops?" said the king. "From where do they come?" "From a land beyond the sea, I assume," said the trusted elder. "Vile scum they are." "Did you get a good look at them?" said the king. "Do we stand a chance against their forces?" "Dark and oily they are, and small in stature, but their painted faces and ringed noses reveal their savagery and eagerness to rape our country." "We must immediately prepare for battle," said Patches, with 2 new blotches on his scalp. "Call on your knights, my king," said Baldspot, sporting a hideous comb-over. "Get them ready for your victory." "For added enjoyment," said Patches, taking a long tube from the inside of his tunic, "we offer you this latest invention from our country. It is called a telescope." "What does it do?" asked the king, taking the gray metal tube. "Take a glance through the lens and see for yourself," said Baldspot. Pressing an eye against the lens on the small end of the tube, the king pointed the telescope to a servant girl at the far end of the hall. Immediately, his jaw dropped and his eye backed away from the lens. "How did she get so close and so far so quickly?" said the king. "What kind of magic does this device contain?" "No magic, your majesty," said Patches with a grin. "Just advances in technology." Gazing into the lens again, the king stayed fixed on the servant girl's ample bosom. "Most people in my country use it to study heavenly bodies," said Boldspot. "That's exactly what I am doing now," said the king, licking his upper lip. "You may be asking yourself why we offer this gift to you," said Patches, handing the king a cloth. "Well, I'll tell you. We want you to see the invasion for yourself. From the comfort of your own balcony, you will be able to see the victorious battle that saves your kingdom from total destruction." "Finally," said the king, wiping his mouth and lowering the telescope. "We get some action around here. I've been waiting for this moment all my life." Giddy with glee, the king commanded his captain to ready the men for battle. "Take only the strongest and bravest," he told them, "those with the most skill and the most discipline. Men ready to sacrifice their lives for their king make haste. And do not stop fighting until the oily men with painted faces and pierced skin retreat to their country or lay slaughtered in the fields. He would be watching them with his new device." The captain bowed, shoved elders aside, and raced to the palace tavern. There he gathered the best men, young and brawny, quick and alert, and on their 4th cup of ale for the day. "Listen up, knights," said the captain to the line of dazed men standing in front of him. "Your king and country need you. Today we face our most vicious enemies, beasts so cunning they have gone unnoticed until now. Today we expose them and reveal their true nature to be that of thieves, of murderers, of violators of women, and of an inferior species. Those of us who do not return will be honored with an image of our king over their graves. Onward to victory." "Where are we going again?" inquired a droopy-eyed knight in a slurred voice. "To fight the foreign invaders," said the captain. "How foreign are they?" said the knight, tilting into the captain's chest. "Are they really that different from us? Do we really have to scare them off?" "Unless you want your children painting their faces and sticking rings up their noses, we have no choice but to stamp them out," said the captain. "What kind of paint are we talking about?" said the knight, side-hugging his superior. "The worst kind," responded the captain, flinging the knight's arm off his shoulder. "Which is?" "Brown." "Are we talking light brown or dark brown?" "How many drinks have you had today, Sir Knight?" said the captain, giving the knight a good shove. "This many, Sir Captain," said the knight, holding up 7 fingers, dissolving into chuckles. "Good God," said the captain. "I told everyone 5 is the limit." "Let the brown people stay," slurred the knight. "I can live with brown. I think everyone can." The other knights nodded in agreement. "Who cares if they wear nose rings?" continued the knight. "I personally wouldn't cut my nose, but if some poor idiot wants to mutilate himself, I say, more power to him." Without warning, the captain raised his dagger and sliced off the knight's right ear. Speaking over the knight's howling screams, the captain said, "Does anyone else here endorse mutilation and face painting?" Knights lowered their shaking heads. "That's what I thought," said the captain, pressing his boot on the severed ear. "Going forward, if anyone promotes the customs of the brown-faced enemies, they will be seen as traitors of the kingdom and will receive the harshest punishment." The captain and his knights marched in silence, faces wrapped in scowls, weapons gripped and ready to wield. They kicked aside any goat or dog that got in their way, They spit in the little grimy palms of any child who begged them for food. They tore through the huts of the villagers and tossed out tables and chairs, jars and pots, clothing and tools. "What's the meaning of this?" said a skinny woman, holding her infant close to her bosom. "What are you doing to my home? We've done nothing wrong." "Invaders are in these parts," said a knight. "You should be glad we are here, to protect you and your child." "How is breaking my pots and plates protecting me? You've made me poorer than I already was." "Are you saying the king is not a good provider?" said the captain. "He's the absolute best," said the woman, pressing her chin to her chest while pulling on her collar. "I would never complain about the king. I just don't understand your tactics in finding these so-called invaders." "No one needs to explain the king's order to a peasant woman. For your own safety, we will lock you in your hut until the invaders are driven out." Once the captain tied the woman's hands, he tied the infant's hands. "Untie my baby at once, you brute!" shouted the woman. "He's harmless." "In times of war, everyone is a potential threat," said the captain. "You should be ashamed of yourself," cried the woman. "Treating your own people like criminals." She spit in the captain's direction. Rushing forward with fury, 6 armed knights knocked the woman and infant to the ground and dragged the woman by the hair into her hut. They promptly bound the front door with an iron chain and lock. "Did her spit injure you in any way, brave captain?" asked a knight. "Just my dignity," said the captain, wiping away a tear. "Shall we lock up the rest of the women and children?" asked another knight. "No telling how much saliva they got hidden in those filthy mouths of theirs." "We didn't bring enough chains and locks," said the captain. "If these people want to ignore foreigners in their midst and go on working in the fields and tending to their flocks like the stupid peasants that they are, let them. Our mission is to protect our king, not these worthless dogs." And so the captain and his fearless knights marched forward out of the village and into a wooded area. "Stay alert, gallant knights," said the captain, standing in the center of the circle he had formed, completely protected by his men. "This is where the elders saw the invaders. They could attack at any moment." Some knights drew their swords and axes and raised their shields. Others stretched their bows and pointed their arrows toward the line of motionless trees. Large blasts of adrenaline catapulted into their hearts, widening eyes and drying mouths. Every knight suddenly felt warm, quick breaths brushing against the back of their necks. After 5 intense minutes of waiting for the ambush, the captain raised his head and said, "Does anyone see a painted face?" "I see no faces but our own," said a knight. "Looks like we're going to have to do a search of the area," said the captain. "I want you digging through bushes, climbing trees, inspecting every crevice, rummaging through every pile of leaves to cover more ground. Go in pairs." "You come with me," said one knight to the other. "I already committed to going with him," responded the second knight. "You can't go with him because he's coming with me," said a third knight. "And what about me?" said a fourth knight. "Will you idiots grab the person closest to you and get moving?" said the captain. "We don't got all day." Knights grumbled when they didn't get the partner they had wished for. They slumped away into different directions and murmured obscenities while they performed their search. Only 15 minutes must have passed when the captain grew tired of chewing on his fingernails and standing behind a wall of 4 husky knights. He shouted for everyone to return. "Since no one called out for help," said the captain, I'm assuming you found nothing. Are you sure this is where the elders saw the invaders? Asked a knight. Are you calling me an idiot? Because that's what it sounds like. Forgive my questioning. I was just trying to make sense of the situation. Grunts like you aren't allowed to think, said the captain. If anyone's going to analyze the situation, it's me. I'm the one who answers to the king. I'm the one who has to tell him we found no invaders. And what do you think he's going to do to me? With a defeated whimper, the captain plopped himself on a large stone and buried his face in his hands. If there was only a way to let him know I did everything I could to find the enemy. I think he already knows, said a knight. What do you mean? Said the captain. Don't you remember? He has that new device, the one you told us about, that thing the advisors called a telescope, and he's probably watching us right now. You bloody fool! Shouted the captain, springing to his feet. You let me stand around doing nothing, knowing his eyes were upon me. You didn't remind me on purpose, so you could take over once he puts me to death. Sorry to rupture your plans, because the invaders just arrived. Knights cowered and held out their shaky weapons. I don't see anyone, said a knight. They're right in front of you, said the captain. Do they possess the power of invisibility? Said a knight. Is there an incantation to break the spell? Move forward and start fighting, said the captain, sword raised high and facing the palace. He lunged his blade into an imaginary foe and split the ground as if he was cutting into someone's neck. Archers, he called out, shoot your arrows into the sky. Let the king see your valor in action. Archers raised their bows, and one of them said, What are we aiming for? For heaven's sake, release the bloody arrows, shouted the captain. Arrows soared into the trees, evoking an overly enthusiastic roar from the captain, who still faced the palace. Keep the arrows flying, said the captain. You swordsmen and axemen, bust up those logs. Show the king how savage and merciless you are. And don't stop until I tell you. The captain pulled on a nearby knight and said, You four, piss on that dirt and make some mud. Then spread it across your cheeks. And then come out of the woods and act like you're attacking us. Why would we do that? Said the knight. If the king and his advisors want to see a battle, that's exactly what we're going to give them. Within minutes, men emerged from the woods, faces covered in dark brown mud, waving their swords high in the air. The king must be clapping with joy seeing us stop the brown-faced invasion, said the captain. Now let's make him cry with joy, by making the fight look as real as possible. The captain poked the tip of his sword into the shoulder blade of one of the mud-covered men. Bloody hell, said the wounded man. That was my good shoulder. Everyone keep pretending, said the captain. You call this blood pretend blood, do you? Slashing into another man's palm, the captain shouted, The king needs to hear wailing. The king needs to see bodies fall to the ground. Everyone suddenly hit the floor. Not all at once, you idiots, said the captain. Half of you roll over and stand up. No one moved. Why isn't anyone getting up? A timid voice came forth. If we get up, you're probably going to stab us. The injury is not for me, it's for your king. Those who stand up will get a bonus round of ale. 10 knights rose to their feet. Now, fight each other, said the captain, and make it believable. One knight received an axe in the upper back. One sustained a blow to the back of the head. One tasted blood when his mouth was pounded with the edge of a shield. Another knight endured an arrow through the leg. "Stay away from the arteries," said the captain. "Otherwise, you're all doing great." When 5 knights were left standing, the captain ordered them to lower their weapons. He fell to his knees, stretched out his arms in the shape of a V, and cried out, "Long live the victorious king!" "Can we get up now?" said a knight whose back was propped up against a tree. "Let us march forward for 10 minutes so the king can follow us with his device," responded the captain. "Then come rushing in, jumping for joy, so the king can see our masculinity on display." "Bravo!" exclaimed the king from his balcony. "My men are weeping and holding each other. The true alphas never disappoint." He motioned for the big-bosomed servant girl, who was holding up his telescope, to move aside. "This calls for a great feast in my honor," declared the king. "Should you not rest, your majesty?" said Patches. "You must be exhausted, your majesty, from shouting out every detail of the battle," said Baldspot. "They're walking, they're talking, they're breaking into huts, was what you said," said Patches. "Now they're dragging a woman, locking her up, then walking again, talking some more, entering the woods, sitting, and hold on. We got knights falling, we got arrows flying. It's chaos. People running left and right. The enemy is upon us, painted faces in the lens. I can't bear to watch. Oh yes, my knights have fallen but have risen up. Fight, men, fight, fight for your king. The enemy has been defeated. But watch your backs. There has to be more than what I saw, somewhere hiding and waiting." "Perhaps you are right," said the king, yawning. "My vocal cords feel a little strained. Nevertheless, prepare the feast for when my men arrive. There will be eating and drinking on through the night. Meanwhile, I will take a much-needed nap." With the sun sinking into the horizon, the servant girl dared to nudge the king's head away from her bosom. "Your Majesty," she whispered as they lay in the royal bed, "it is getting late. The captain and the knights have been waiting for you. The table is set and the feast is ready to begin." A line of drool dangled from his mouth as he lifted his head. "These new royal pillows put me in such a deep sleep. I wish I could stay there for days." "Thank you, your Majesty," said the servant girl, eyes averted and collar pulled. "It is of the greatest honor to shelter your head and watch you sleep." "A king's work is never done," said the king, sitting up, off to celebrate a victory and prepare for the next. When entering his great hall, the king was met with thunderous applause and bended knees. Knights tossed rose petals at his feet, while servant girls danced behind his long flowing robe. "All hail the mighty and victorious king," shouted the elders and the knights. The king's advisors took him by the hands and led him to his throne. Once seated with the 2 advisors at his side, the king called upon the captain. With bowed head, the captain approached him and said, "Let it be known throughout the lands, no one knows military strategy as much as you, dear king. No one is as fearless in the face of danger as you are. Because of your divine leadership and skill, we have returned victorious." Applause and cheers erupted again, shaking the walls and tables of the great hall. "Silence," said the king, receiving it instantaneously. "All that you say is true, good captain. I have driven out my enemies before, and will drive new ones out any time they show themselves. As I followed today's battle through this handy telescope, I was pleased with how you handled those nasty brown-faced rodents. But something puzzles me. My advisors claimed there was a whole army moving our way. From what I witnessed, I only saw a handful of foreign invaders. So, where are the rest?" "With all due respect, Your Majesty," said the captain, his voice cracking, "you may want to get that telescope checked for deficiencies." "Whatever for?" "Look at the tiny lens on this thing," said the captain, taking it from the servant girl. "Such a lens cannot capture an entire army. If only you were there in person, you would have seen hundreds flanking us, outnumbering us, so ready to take the kingdom. But we fought hard, Your Majesty. That you did see. What you also did not see through this tiny hole was the devastation of the villages. Peasants fled into the fields as their huts and livestock were destroyed. I beg of you, Your Majesty, stay in the palace. It's too dangerous to go out." "Devastation," said the king, leaning forward to get a better look at the captain. "Are we talking about fire and chaos and attacks on women and children?" "And so much more," responded the captain. "I should get a second look," said the king, stretching his hand for the telescope. But before he could touch it, the captain snapped the telescope in half. "Forgive me, my king," cried the captain. "Kill me if you must, but I just couldn't allow your delicate eyes to behold such destruction and desolation. I just couldn't bear to see your heart break." Taken aback by such concern for his well-being, the king offered a fatherly smile. "Have you ever seen such loyalty in other kingdoms?" said the king to his advisers. "Sometimes the most loyal are the most treacherous," said Baldspot, staring into the captain, strands of hair slipping off his head. "Well, what I see delights me," said the king. "Let the feasting begin." Roasted quail and duck were brought out on silver trays, along with dishes of pickled cabbage and steamed carrots. Pig ears and pig snouts made their way among the guests, who combined the tasty meats with freshly made bread and butter. Cups were filled to the brim with wine or ale, and everyone took advantage of asking for seconds and thirds. Minstrels played merry music on fiddle and lute, while young servant girls joined hands and danced in a line. While the feasting and the merriment carried on, the king, who had allowed his captain to sit at his side, wanted to know more about the battle. "Tell me," said the king, "how many men did we lose in the fight?" Lifting his head just enough to see the advisers standing in front of him, the captain said, "We suffered slashes and arrows and some blows to the body, but no deaths, Your Majesty. Your spirit must have been protecting us." Good to hear," said the king. "Ask him about prisoners," said Patches. "Ah, yes, prisoners," said the king. "Surely you caught a few." "Prisoners, Your Majesty," said the captain, coughing up a ball of chewed duck meat. He noticed the two advisers crossing their arms and mouthing the word traitor. "Yes, prisoners," said the king. "I hope you didn't slaughter all the invaders, though I wouldn't blame you." "Oh, yes, we have prisoners, plenty of them," said the captain, sweating and yanking on his collar. "I would very much like to see them, before I execute them in the public square," said the king. "In fact, His Majesty would like to see them now," said Baldspot with a wicked grin, "before the feasting ends." "No telling what would happen to you if they have escaped," said Patches, dragging his index finger across his neck. "They haven't escaped, that I can guarantee," said the captain, standing and bowing. "I will fetch them at once." Storming into the palace tavern, the captain found his wounded knights sitting in a dark corner, nursing their cuts and slashes and sipping on ale. "Can we now attend the feast?" said a wounded knight with a sparkling hope in his eyes. "Not sure why you let the others attend, but kept us out of it." "We have a more serious problem," he told them. The king needs enemy prisoners, and he needs them right now. "We going to pull them out of our asses," said a knight, who got a mug flung at him. "Another remark like that and you'll be saying your last words at the guillotine," said the captain. "But he has a point, Captain," said another knight. "Where are we going to find prisoners at this hour?" "On the way over here, I could only think of one group that is easy to apprehend," said the captain. "We arrest the field workers." "Field workers?" said a knight. "I got cousins that work them fields. They're not our enemies." "It's either them or us," said the captain. A familiar voice spoke from behind the captain. "Those workers are innocent. I can vouch for that. If you arrest them, who's going to pick the crops and put food on our tables?" "Who's talking to you, you one-eared freak?" said the captain with a scowl. The knight with a bandaged ear rose and said, "I'm not sure what's going on here, but arresting the field workers doesn't seem like the best solution. Who will the king go after next? The herders, the masons, the carpenters, the women and children?" "Take hold of that man," ordered the captain. 2 knights took hold of the young man's arms, while 2 others grabbed his legs. "You see, men," said the captain, taking out a dagger, "questioning the king in public demands a quick and harsh response. This way, the questioning may never be done again, by anyone." The captain motioned for other knights to force the young man's mouth open, so he could pull on a squirming pink tongue. Slowly and steadily, he carved his blade across the tongue, causing blood to spurt onto everyone standing nearby. Holding up the severed tongue, the captain turned to his men and said, "Does anyone else want to question the king?" He watched the young man drop to the floor, coil up in a ball of pain, and try to stop the blood from flowing out of his mouth. "Shouldn't we put him out of his misery?" said a knight, looking down with pitying eyes. "Traitors need to feel trauma," said the captain. "This way, if he survives, he'll be quick to stop others from following his rebellious path." Using the hair of the young man squirming on the floor, the captain wiped the blood off his blade. "Prisoners should be in the great hall by the crack of dawn, for that is when the feast comes to an end. The sun is now sinking into the horizon, which means we must work fast and efficiently. As we march into the village, for some of you it may be difficult to accept that your own neighbors and own family members are the new enemy. Just don't look them in the eye when you attack, as compassion may fool you into sparing them and letting them go free. The moment that happens, you will be considered a field worker and taken in their place. Therefore, let us raise our swords and go forth in the name of the king and in the name of honor and righteousness for the glory of God." Hazy golden hues hung in the darkening sky as male field workers, carrying an array of farm tools, rakes, pitchforks, scythes, shovels, and winnowing baskets, arrived at their tiny huts. After washing hands and faces, they settled into their wobbly wooden chairs and gratefully scooped gruel into their eager mouths. In one particular hut, one particular father of 4 looked his wife in the eyes and praised her cooking. "Nothing like a bowl of soggy stale gruel and a good piece of hard and dry bread after 12 hours of working in the sun," said the father. "Thank you, love," said the mother, feeding her toddlers. "With all the washing and baking and tending to the animals and the children, it's a wonder we have a meal at all. We might not have much, but at least we have each other." "Yes, indeed, love. What a blessing it is to have a family. And speaking of families, Did you hear about what happened to our cousins 2 doors down? Another infection? Those children play with dung way too often. Poor thing, said the mother. Our cousin got beaten and dragged by a group of the king's knights. I hear she fell pretty hard and with her infant in her arms. The poor tiny baby isn't doing so well, smashed up and all. Then the knights locked her up in her own hut and wouldn't let her out. When did this happen? After they ransacked our homes. A quick survey of the hut revealed to the father that everything was in place, nothing was missing. It's a good thing they didn't come in here. Oh, they came all right. Threw out tables and chairs, pots and pans, chickens and eggs. I just put everything back as soon as they left. Going through another man's property without permission is against the king's laws, said the father. Not in time of war, said the mother, wiping snot off her toddler's nose. When did we go to war? Today, I guess. Peeking out of our window, I saw the knights fighting. Magical beings, I suppose, because the enemy was completely invisible to the naked eye. Never heard of such an enemy. And that wasn't the craziest part. All of a sudden, they started fighting each other. Have they gone mad? I thought it was some kind of minstrel show. Some parts were hilarious, especially the ending when they all hugged each other and jumped around like idiots. So why hadn't anyone notified us of an invasion? Knights just show up at our doors and go through our homes and hurt our women. This could turn into something dangerous for us workers. Something tells me they won't be coming back, said the mother, grabbing onto his hand. I think they accomplished what they set out to do. We needn't worry about another inspection, if that's what you want to call it. We can just go about our normal lives, working and slaving away for the glorious king. Sounds like a load of rubbish to me, these invisible enemies, this invented war, this sham of a victory. Hush now, love. Keep those sort of words to yourself. We don't want to suffer pain like our cousin, poor woman, poor infant. If I wasn't so tired, I'd go and visit her, said the father, rising from his seat and kissing his wife and children. This work schedule the king has put in place doesn't allow for much interaction with neighbors, does it? Stretching himself out on a straw mat, the father yawned and welcomed his wife and children to lay next to him. There is little beauty in this world, said the father, and it is all right here at my side. He slowly drifted into sleep, suspended in a peaceful darkness, his mind and body regenerating to face the drudgery of another day in the fields. Just as he was about to lose connection with time and space, his door blasted open and large, bulky men came rushing in. They yanked him and his family off the mat and shook his children to tears. "Why are you doing this?" shouted the mother, desperately trying to break free from the king's knights, unsuccessfully fighting to reach her weeping children. "Leave our children alone!" "We are not your enemies," shouted the father, forced to his knees. "We work for the king. He needs us." "The king doesn't need diseased vermin like you," snarled a knight. "You're easily replaced." Upon seeing the knights bind the hands of his wife and children, the father pleaded, "Take me instead. You don't want them? I lied when I said I'm not the enemy. I am the one you're looking for. Have mercy and let them go free." A brutal punch to the cheek sent the father to the ground, but he could still see his wife and children kicking and screaming as they were carried out of the hut. He could hear his wife's voice bursting with a sudden boldness. "You have no right to do this. We have done nothing wrong." You best be shutting up if you don't want us taking your children and shipping them off to the lands beyond the sea," said a knight in a harsh tone. "If monsters of the deep don't eat them up, maybe some foreign noble will take them as his slave. And we've all heard the stories of what those perverted foreign nobles like to do to children, haven't we?" At these words, the father fumbled to his feet, but was received with blows to the eyes, the jaw, and the back of his head. When the knights grew tired of beating on him, they dragged him out and tossed him like a rotten carcass at the tiny feet of his children. "Why did you have to beat him so bad?" cried his wife, falling to her knees and kissing his wounds. "Why can't you just leave us alone?" Barely able to lift his head, the father gazed at his wife and children through his swollen eyes and whimpered, "There's so little beauty in the world, and all of it is right here, by my side." A large boot then stomped on his head, and he lost connection with time and space. He didn't see the captain arrive with other field workers who were equally beaten and barely alive. "I want mud on their faces," said the captain to the knights drunk on ale and power. "Burn a few huts and kill a few chickens and pigs. And why have the women and children gone silent? Give them a good shaking so their cries will be heard all the way to the king's great hall." As a knight took hold of the mother and her 4 toddlers, she said, "Please, good knight, you don't want to do this to your own people. Look at us. We're probably cousins of some sort. Look at the faces of my children. Do you really want to be remembered as a knight who attacked children? What happened to the virtues of knighthood? Mercy, courtesy, protectors of the defenseless, respect towards women." The knight yanked on the woman's hair and covered her face with ale-smelling spit. "Those days are gone, you dumb whore." "They don't have to be," said the woman. "They vanished when the captain said, 'It's either them or us,'" said the knight, "and we always choose us." Lutes and fiddles played on through the great feast. Anytime the players stopped for a break, the king called them back to his table to lift his spirits. With blistered fingers, the players pressed into their stringed instruments and plucked out a festive tune, laughing to hide their pain. "And where are the dancers?" said the king. "Who gave them permission to rest?" At once the sweat-drenched servant girls hustled to the scene and twirled and leapt and swung their arms, always with a king-sized smile. "Oh, my back and neck," complained the king. "How long have I been sitting?" "Perhaps you should take a short walk, your majesty," said Patches. "That should get rid of the stiffness." "Hopefully by then the prisoners will arrive," said Baldspot. "If your knights return empty-handed, we know exactly what to do with them." Elders and servants bowed as the king and his advisers made their way to the entrance of the great hall. Guards swung open the large wooden doors and let them pass. Once outside, the king inhaled the cool, crisp air and scrunched his nose at the burnt smell filling his nostrils. The smell didn't carry with it the flavor of pork or chicken. The smell was closer to charred wheat or the burning of discarded bedding straw. He raised his head and saw white smoke wafting above the palace walls. "You, yes, you up there," hollered the king to the guard patrolling the gate tower. "Who is burning trash at this hour?" "It's coming from the village, your majesty," said the guard. "Looks like homes are on fire." "The invasion, your majesty," said Patches. "We should get you inside." "Aha," said the king. "I knew there were more invaders. I didn't need a telescope to show me what I already suspected." "For your own protection, brave king," said Baldspot. "Please go inside." Just as the king allowed his advisors to lead him by the hands, a chorus of howls scaled the tower and landed on the king's ears. "What is that awful sound?" said the king, poking index fingers into his ear canals. "It is the sound of absolute loyalty," said Patches with a sinister grin. "Make it stop," whined the king. "It sounds like women and children crying." "That is the very sound you need to hear," said Baldspot, stretching out his ear. "Whenever we heard that sound in the other kingdoms we served, it always meant complete safety for the rulers. You can now ride your carriage through the countryside and not be harmed," said Patches with euphoric certitude. "I could always ride through the countryside and not be harmed," said the king, wiping earwax on his advisor's fur collars. "With 20 armed escorts, I could go anywhere." "Well," said Baldspot, "now you can go with 10 escorts instead of 20. Creaking and clanging drowned out the howling women and children as the drawbridge was lowered. "The captain has returned!" shouted the tower guard. "The captain has returned, and he's bringing a mob of brown-faced foreigners." "I knew I could count on my men," said the king, rubbing his palms. "I knew they wouldn't let me down." "Yes, your majesty," said Patches with a frown. "Your men came through after all." "Why the sad faces?" said the king. "We should be celebrating. Apart from stopping the invasion, we now have the added bonus of prisoners to torture and execute." Patches cleared his throat and pulled on his collar with the usual averting of eyes and said, "We are sad, indeed, very sad. For with your victory comes the realization that you might not need us anymore." With a hearty slap to his advisors' backs, the king exclaimed, "Nonsense! You can stay as long as you wish." The slap made handfuls of hair drop to the ground, leaving the advisors with a horseshoe shape around their scalps. Not sure what happened there," said the king, kicking away the wads of hair. "But you have both proven your worthiness. I can see a great future for our partnership. Together, we can build a stronger army and drive out any invaders that linger in the land," said Patches. "Together, we can decree new laws that will increase your wealth and your authority," added Baldspot. "Together, we can restore family values," said the king. "Allowing families to spend more time in each other's presence, I can see it plain as day. Men, women, and children all working in the fields at the same time. I have so many amazing ideas." "It would be our greatest honor to carry out all your well-designed and selfless plans," said Patches with a bow fit for a king. When the captain finally arrived with his knights and presented the prisoners to the king at first was taken aback. He approached the prisoners and studied their muddy faces, the purple bruising, the busted lips, the swollen eyes, the slashes across the cheeks. Despite all the wounds and the mud, there was something familiar about these broken men. He had seen them before. But where and when? "Where did you find these prisoners?" said the king. "In the village, your majesty," responded the captain. "They put up a good fight and tried to escape, but we subdued them, and now they are here ready for their punishment." "I swear I have seen them before," said the king, walking down the line of prisoners. "From my daily ritual of standing over my balcony and looking at people who come through the gates with deliveries, some of their faces stand out. Aren't these men the same men who work the fields?" Yes, your majesty," stammered the captain, nearly tearing off his collar. You are always right, these traitors. They were secretly aiding the foreign invaders. As we said, added Patches, sometimes the most loyal are the most treacherous. Once again, traitors in our midst, asserted the king. How could I have overlooked such falsehood in people walking past me every day? Do not blame yourself, good king, said Baldspot. Peasants are the most crafty of God's creatures. They look meek and passive, but underneath their rags and unwashed faces lies a corrupt heart and a vulgar mind, ready to turn on their rulers at the drop of a coin. Peasants seem content with their misery, wise king, added Patches. But all the while they are saying to themselves, how I wish I had the king's treasure. How I wish I had the king's throne. None of them can be trusted. The only people you can completely trust are your advisers, said Baldspot. We have no interest in your riches or your power. We live only to make you happy. Where would I be without my advisers? Said the king. Heaven must have sent you to watch over me. A collective murmur rippled across the column of knights, rising into a swell of hisses and boos. The captain grumbled and raised his fist in fury. Appalled by the display of hostility, Patches turned red and shouted, How dare you shame your king? Our anger is not against our king, said the captain. It is against this walking monstrosity. Making his way through the jeering crowd, a young knight cautiously approached the king, one hand over his mouth, another hand holding a scroll of parchment. Genuflecting as best as he could, the knight held out the scroll and waited for someone to take it. What is the meaning of this? Said Baldspot. What message do you bring? When the one-eared knight said nothing and persisted in holding up the scroll, Patches shouted, Your king orders you to speak. The idiot has no tongue, said the captain, knocking away the hand that covered the young knight's swollen mouth. I'm surprised he's still alive. What does the dumb bastard want? Said the king. Loud moans vented out of the sides of the young knight's lips as he motioned for the advisers to hand the scroll to the king. The moaning and hand motions became so excessive and horrendous that the king grabbed the scroll himself. What does it say? Asked the king, handing the scroll to Patches. What does it say? Said Patches, putting the scroll in the hands of his fellow adviser. With a proud grin, Baldspot unrolled the scroll and stated, It says, Field workers innocent no invasion. Captain made up story. Field workers innocent, pondered the king. No invasion. Captain made up story. A brief silence brought the captain to his knees. Do you know what this means? Said the king, looking at his advisers who had backed away a few steps. It means this young knight is a traitor. And must be punished accordingly, said Patches. Captain, said Baldspot, cut this man's hands off immediately. With pleasure, said the captain, rising to his feet. Shouldn't we hang him instead or burn him alive? Said the king. We want him to live, said Baldspot, so he can serve as an example to others. The king turned away as the captain chopped off the knight's hands at the wrists. Streams of blood squirted out of the stubs, leaving a dark red trail as the knight was dragged away. This is the ideal citizen, said Patches. A man who can half hear and see what his ruler says and does, and cannot speak or write his dissent. Enough violence for the night, said the king, yawning. I'm tired and need some rest. And what of the prisoners? Said the captain. Throw them in the dungeons for now, said the king. When I am rested, My advisors and I will schedule their execution. Executions everyone can enjoy." It took 2 days for the king to sufficiently rest and regain enough energy to receive visitors. "The counts are here to see you, your majesty," said Baldspot, standing by the king's throne. "Oh, tell them to come back another day," said the king, tossing a half-eaten turkey leg. "Can't you see I'm busy?" "They have been waiting for 2 days, your most gracious majesty," said Patches. "They say it's of the utmost importance." "Very well," said the king, sucking on his greasy fingers. "If you throw ut in the wording, that means I'm obligated to see them." 4 men wearing shiny gold rings entered the room, all of them dressed in long blue robes made of the finest velvet. With eyes averted and collars pulled, they bowed and thanked the king and his advisors for attending to the matter at hand. "We rarely leave our posts, your majesty," said the count with the whitest hair, "as that is what you have ordered. But when no deliveries of food and drink and other basic necessities arrived, we set out to find out why. Had our workers fallen to illness or to sloth or to disaster? Come to find out, our workers were arrested without our knowledge." "For good reasons," said the king. "They were arrested for good reasons." "Instead of coming to the king, you should have put the women and children to work in the fields," said Patches. "They got hands and feet like the men, just smaller and weaker." "It will take weeks to train them," said the count. "In the meantime, who will pick our crops, gather the wheat, and prepare the soil for the next harvest? Without the field workers, taverns will go dry, people and livestock will go hungry. Who can think of food and drink during a time of a foreign invasion?" said the king, as his servant girl brought him a silver platter full of fruit and vegetables and a goblet filled to the brim with red wine. "Invasion," said the count. "I recall a young man roaming the land asking about invaders, and he was told there were none. Did they suddenly show up, again without our knowledge?" "Not only did they appear, but your precious field workers aided them against the king," said Baldspot. "Our field workers?" said the count, throwing up his hands in disbelief. "When would they have the time to conspire with the enemy? When they work from dawn until dusk? By the time they get home, they only have time to eat, create new peasants, and sleep." "Are you calling your king a liar?" said Patches, getting close to the count's face. "I think he is calling me a liar," said the king. "Forgive me, your majesty," said the count, bowing. "I would never dare question your judgment. I just personally did not see any foreign invaders in the land." "Aha!" shouted the king, rising to his feet. "Another traitor! Arrest him at once, strip him of his garments, and make sure his noble flesh touches the unclean flesh of his peasant workers." Though the count begged for mercy, the guards paid him no heed and hauled him away. "And what about the rest of you?" said the king. "Did you also not see invaders?" The 3 remaining counts dropped to their knees, clasped their hands, and exclaimed, "There were too many to count. They were fierce and dark. You saved us once again, O great warrior, and we are forever grateful." "Return to your posts," said the king, "and keep a sharper eye out for traitors from within. They seem to be everywhere. If it wasn't for my 2 trusted advisors, my kingdom would have been lost by now." Once the counts were gone, the king, full of gratitude, patted the backs of his advisors and told them he wanted to show them what no other advisor had ever seen. Down a narrow, winding staircase, the 3 men wormed through the darkness, delving deep into the castle. deeper than the dungeon and the rats. "Wouldn't it be safer if we used a torch?" said Patches, clinging to his partner's hand. "My father used to bring me here as a child," said the king. "I know the path by memory. Once you pass the dungeon, you go down 13 more steps." "Where are the guards?" said Boldspot. "Surely they need some lighting." "Only kings and future kings are allowed in these parts," said the king. "Are you not afraid of guards sneaking in and stealing from you?" asked Patches. "Perhaps we should order some men to secure the area." "There is no need," said the king. "We kings tell our subjects that the area beyond the dungeon is haunted by the living dead, and rats don't even dare to enter. Tales of horror are the easiest ways to keep the lower classes from finding your wealth." The king abruptly stopped, causing his advisors to bump into each other and regain their balance against a cold, damp wall. "I bring you both here because I have thoroughly judged your character," said the king, "and found it to be swaddled in virtue. No one has ever shown me the loyalty that you have shown. Not my queen, not my sons, not my elders, or my captain. The day I realized you had no interest in my treasures or my power, a divine voice spoke to me. 'Open the door,' said the voice, 'let them in.' And so here we are, ready to make my kingdom more powerful and more wealthy than every other kingdom in the world." A bright yellow glow inundated the darkness the moment the king opened a heavy iron door. Eyes gleamed, jaws dropped, tears glistened, advisors embraced. "So much gold!" squealed Patches. "So much rubies and emeralds," said Boldspot. "My most prized possessions," said the king, entering the room. The advisors, still bedazzled by the outrageous amount of treasure, dared to lift their heads. Their steps were gentle and precise, in an effort to preserve the sanctity of accumulated wealth. Patches reached for a golden cup, but Boldspot quickly slapped his hand away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said the king. "I don't visit as often as I'd like, but just knowing it's down here gives me great peace of mind. My favorite treasures are these marble statues of myself and these elegant tapestries with my face. Nothing screams priceless as loud as these works depicting your likeness," said Patches, pulling on his collar. "Have you ever taken inventory, Your Majesty?" inquired Boldspot, nudging his elbow into his partner's rib. "Taking inventory is for paupers," said the king. "How will you spend all this gold, Your Majesty?" said Patches, poking his own elbow into his fellow advisor's stomach. "That's why you are here," said the king. "You who have traveled through different lands and have encountered different forms of governance, I want to use my riches to build more buildings and statues in my honor. I want my face on every coin and on every temple. You can also build more telescopes, more carriages, and more advanced weapons," added Patches. "You can lower wages and increase hours and demand more tribute from the nobility," said Boldspot. "I just realized," said the king, resting his chin over his knuckles, "I'm going to need a bigger room." "But first," said Patches. "But first what?" said Boldspot, staring into those sunken dark holes Patches called eyes. "But first we must finish what we started," responded Patches. "Now that we know what treasures need protection and what future we can accomplish, we must stamp out every single traitor in the kingdom." "With your permission, Supreme and Everlasting King," said Boldspot with a bow, "allow us to go out with your knights into the villages, so we may ensure your victory is complete." Needless to say, the permission was granted for advisors and knights to raid the villages and terrorize the peasants. if a hint of mercy was shown in the previous encounters with the king's subjects, now that mercy was nowhere to be seen. In the first outlying village, peasants huddled in fear inside their huts, parents doing their best to console their shivering and weeping children. "Soon this will all be over," said mothers, rocking and holding their children tightly against their bosoms. "Whatever you see them do to Papa and Mama," said fathers, standing by their doors, "you don't get in the way, do you understand? You stay at the table with your siblings." "We all have to be strong," said mothers, holding back tears. "We have to hope that these men have hearts, and that those hearts will turn away from hatred and violence, and instead offer love and peace towards their fellow man." None of these words prevented the children from wailing and clinging to their parents. Once the knights broke through the doors, the children tried to obey their parents and stay at the table with their brothers and sisters, but the knights yanked them by their scrawny arms and flung them outside. It was as if the knights and the advisors wanted them to see what they did to their parents. If a child closed his eyes, a knight grabbed his tiny head and pried his eyelids open to an unobstructed view of the total degradation of his parent. "Take a good look at your mother and father," said Patches. "Traitors they are. You don't want a traitor as a mother or father, do you?" Parents shook their heads profusely until their children followed suit. "That's why we're taking them away from you," said Bald Spot with a grin. "You will have a better life without them. You'll be a valued servant to some noble man in a faraway island in a palace, with food and fancy clothing, sleeping in the noble man's bed." "No!" was the collective cry of every mother and father. Though parents screamed and fought, the knights hammered them down into the dirt. Women and men were separated, tied and pulled toward the palace, while children were herded and marched toward the western shore. "Their brutality is merciless, I tell you, merciless," said a young man, 12 years of age, chest heaving from having run a long distance. "I was on the hill herding my goats when I saw them arrive. Like a giant wave they came, destroying both house and inhabitant. Parents and children alike were bound and separated and led in different directions. When I saw them coming my way, I got up and fled, leaving my poor goats behind." "You come from the second outlying village, am I right?" said a grizzled man, handing the young man a clay jar with brownish water. "Which means we are next." "That gives us little time to prepare," said a grimy woman, surrounded by other grimy men and women. "What can we do?" "The correct question is, what should we do?" said the grizzled man. "Let us rise up and fight," said a tall man with a pitchfork in hand. "You mean rise up and die," said the grizzled man. "Well, we can't just sit around and let them take our children," said the grimy woman, holding her child close to her chest. "Perhaps we should flee, hide out in the woods. They will hunt us down and chop us down like trees," said the grizzled man. "We can offer them our wages, our crops, our herds," said the tall man. "From what this young man has told us," said the grizzled man, "they would accept our offer and destroy us anyway." "Bloody hell," said the grimy woman. "You have trampled on every suggestion we have made. Tell us then, O wise husband, what should we do?" "There is no guarantee that this will work," said the grizzled man, "but it is our only sensible option. It is the most difficult of options, but something we can live with and pass on to our children and their children." "So what is it?" said the grimy woman. "Gather all the villagers, including the children," said the grizzled man. "Hurry now. We don't have much time. We need to rehearse what we are going to say and do when the advisors and knights arrive. Meanwhile, you, young man, must go to the other villages and give them the same warning you have given to us, and tell them of our response and insist they do the same. By the time the advisors and knights reached the third outlying village, word must have spread of their merciless brutality. This was the only way the advisors could explain that parents no longer hid in their huts with their children, but waited outside on their knees, with the universal averting of eyes, pulling of raggedy collars, and speaking with shaky voices. "We vow total submission to our king and his advisors," said the villagers in unison. "We will wear his image on our chests and hang it on our walls from this generation to every generation that follows. "The benevolent king accepts your submission," said Baldspot, "and places you under his protection." "Did you not hear the king's proclamation?" said Patches in a fierce tone, when he saw no reaction from the ragged people. "He accepts you as his own, and will make sure you still have a family and a home." "Long live the king!" shouted the villagers, rising to their feet and breaking out in dance. "These are the dumbest people I have ever seen," whispered Patches into his fellow advisor's ear. "It's the same in every kingdom," replied Baldspot. "Subjects always mirror their rulers." The advisors encountered the same words, the same actions, the same attitudes in the rest of the villages of the kingdom. Surprisingly, even among the nobility who stayed in their castles guarding the shores from foreign invaders. At last they could declare to the king, with giant grins spread across their faces, that victory was complete. Absolutely, no traitors remained in his kingdom. This was how the grandest and most elaborate celebration in the world came to be. "You must now go forward into the land in a grand procession," said Baldspot to the king sitting on his throne. "Grand procession?" said the king. "How so?" "The grandest in all of history," said Patches. "In front of you an army of knights, behind you the elders and the nobility, and behind them all your people from every village, marching and saluting your greatness." "That does sound rather nice," said the king. "And most importantly," said Baldspot, "you will sit on your jeweled carriage, our gift to you, pampered by young maidens, and serenaded by the best musicians. All will march in awe as you wave and bless the land, as their savior, their champion, their king, their god." "Sounds rather expensive," said the king, clinging to a gold chain around his neck. "Sounds like it would take months to plan." "Not with advisors like us," said Patches. "We already have everything in place. You just say the word and the celebration will pass into all the history scrolls as the greatest event humans have ever witnessed." "I just have to say the word?" said the king. "Yes, your majesty," said Patches, agitation rising in his voice. "Just say the word." "With this procession, you will show your true might, your majesty," said Baldspot calmly. "No other foreigners or traitors would ever dare rise up against you again." "Then let my might be known," said the king, rising to his feet. "Let no one ever again question my authority, my skills, my intelligence, my intentions, my legacy. My word is this: in the name of God, let the victory celebration begin." "This king's inflated sense of superiority is like no other," whispered Patches, as he and his fellow advisor walked along the corridor. "It's the same in every kingdom," replied Baldspot. "Rulers always mirror their deity." On the eve of the victory celebration, The palace was filled with musicians and dancers and acrobats, all of them dedicating their performances to the triumphant king. Elders and knights and the nobility all took turns kissing the king's hand and congratulating him on his conquest, some even getting in line twice. When the king grew tired of all the hand-kissing and entertainment, he ordered for the feast to begin. Flanked by honey cakes and berry pies and the finest wines of the region, the king cut into the roast pig set upon the long table of the great dining hall, and then raised a goblet for all to see. "A toast to myself," said the king, "for finding the best and most loyal advisors in the land. I thank them for planning this great celebration and look forward to the many more they will provide." The two advisors lifted their cups and shouted, "Long live the king!" Everyone who held a cup gulped down a mouthful of wine and spent the rest of the night eating to their heart's delight. Early the next morning, the king stepped out onto his balcony to urinate and found elders and knights and the nobility already in place for the procession. Their applause jolted a yellow stream onto his white pasty knees. "Blasted idiots," he said, swinging his line of urine into a nearby flower pot. "Why did the procession have to start so early?" Just as he put away his family jewel, servants and advisors barged into his chamber, carrying a pile of shiny garments and a golden crown specked with rubies. "Good morning, Your Majesty," said Baldspot. "I hope you slept peacefully and are ready for this marvelous day." "I'm still not sure why I have to march all the way to the western shore," said the king. "A procession around the palace would be quite sufficient." "You are the greatest king that ever lived, and therefore must have the greatest procession ever achieved," said Patches. "Very well," said the king, stretching out his arms to be clothed. "As long as you got me the big-bosomed blondes. They will be seated at your side and will be ready to do whatever you ask of them," said Baldspot, fitting a coat of blue silk over the king's white undergarment. "And what about the musicians?" inquired the king. "Are they bearded like I requested?" "Yes, Your Majesty," said Patches, draping a red velvet surcoat over the king's body. "And they will walk alongside your carriage ready to sing your praises any time you snap your fingers." "It all sounds spectacular," said the king, "but something saddens me." "And what is that, Your Majesty?" said Baldspot. "That my wife and sons could not see me in my greatest hour of glory." "Your most loyal subjects will see you, Your Majesty," said Patches, "and that is what matters most." With a snap, the servants rushed to the king and placed the crown on his most sacred head. "This will be a day your kingdom will remember forever," said Baldspot. "The day I rose above the heavens and joined the pantheon of the gods," said the king, raising a golden staff. From his exit of the palace all the way to his horse-drawn carriage, long, straight trumpets blared majestic fanfare, while his elders and knights saluted him and cheered for him, and women and children tossed rose petals at his feet. "Your knights will lead the way," said Patches. "The rest will follow you. We will stay in the rear to make sure no one leaves the procession." "Shouldn't my guards stay behind?" said the king, "to protect the palace." "That is a sign of incertitude," said Patches, "that you still believe traitors and thieves are in your kingdom and want to hurt you. "We have personally verified your victory is complete," said Baldspot, averting his eyes and pulling on his collar. And that was enough for the king to agree to leaving the gates open and taking everyone with him. Outside the palace gates he was met with peasants, rows and rows of them, men, women, and children all on their knees. On their raggedy tunics, they each displayed one yellow circle. That one yellow circle bore two tiny black dots for eyes, and one line curved in an upward position to signify a smile. Moved by such devotion, the king's eyes swelled with tears. "They are wearing an image of my face," said the king. "I could have never imagined my subjects being more loyal than they already were." "Start moving, you vermin," shouted the captain, cracking a whip. "We have a long way to go." Slowly and wincing with every movement, the peasants dragged their bare knees across the stone, dirt and grass, leaving a trail of flesh and blood across the land. Inspired by his people's veneration, the king snapped his fingers and watched the bearded musicians come alive with a song about his compassion for the poor and weak. Big-bosomed blondes laughed for no reason and massaged his hands and feet as the carriage continued its glorious and bumpy journey. When passing the first village and seeing the huts intact and unharmed, the king called for the captain. "Not too long ago you spoke to me of a devastated kingdom," said the king. "You made it sound as if the enemy had burned and pillaged these wretched villages and left nothing standing." "Ah, yes, your majesty," said the captain, pulling hard on his collar and looking down at the ground. "Your memory is beyond compare. The enemy did destroy the villages, but such is the resiliency of your people that they rebuilt their huts in record time. They wanted to impress you and make you proud. Remind me to give each family a head of lettuce when we get back," said the king, "to show my fatherly love for my simple-minded children." With the peasants walking on their knees, and the king needing to get out and stretch every hour, it took 7 days to reach the western shore. By then, the king was fed up with the procession and wished he had never agreed to do it. He ordered a knight to search the rear for his advisers and to bring them to his carriage immediately. He grimaced at the sight of peasants wrapping strips of tunic around their torn, bloody knees. He watched them sob and bury their faces in the palms of their hands. If only he could feel the same hysterical joy. But his spine and neck felt like they could crack in half at any second. He was sure he had blisters on his butt cheeks and sores ready to pop in his mouth. The blondes and the musicians had outstayed their welcome, and he wished he could give each one of them a good punch in the mouth. He never wanted to ride a carriage again in his life. He wanted no more processions, no more long journeys, no more 3 layers of clothing. He smelled more atrocious than the manure plopping out of the horse's ass. And this was not even the worst part. The worst part was that he now had to endure the journey back to the palace in the same rackety carriage, in the same stinky garments, with the same dreadful people. Where were these damn advisers? Insults of every kind were ready to hurl out of his mouth the moment they showed their ridiculous horseshoe heads. "Please forgive me, your majesty," said the knight, bowing. "Your advisers are nowhere to be found." "What do you mean they can't be found?" said the king. "Did you check the front? Did you ask others if they have seen them?" "Yes, your majesty," said the knight. "Everyone in the back says the same thing. They never joined the procession but stayed at the palace." "Maybe they changed their minds," said the king to himself. "Maybe they decided the palace needed protection. But why didn't they inform me? Why did they make me complete this terrible journey on my own?" The king turned to the rabble before him and shouted, Everyone to the palace." "But we just got here, Your Majesty," whined an elder. "Please give us time to recuperate." "There'll be plenty of time for rest at the palace," said the king. "We need to get there as soon as possible. So, you peasants, no more walking on knees." The look on the faces of the peasants was one of distraught. The furrowed brow, the curled mouth, the sunken cheeks, the dull red gaze staring out into an infinite abyss. And then, all of a sudden, a change. Eyes returned from the void with vibrant sparks of joy. Cheeks inflated with rosy acclamation. Mouths transfigured into radiant glory. Shredded and bloody knees resurrected from the dead and sprinted toward a divine light. The king turned to see what made the peasants so happy. Rushing toward them came a horde of scrawny, filthy children, most of them weeping in disbelief that such a reunion would ever take place. And yet, for many children, a reunion was lacking, as their parents still sat in a prison cell, waiting for a trial that never came. Peasant adults did their best to comfort these children, averting their eyes when reassuring them they would soon see their parents. "What are all these children doing way out here on their own?" asked the king. "We know nothing about this," said an elder. "Ask the captain." "Oh," said the captain with a forced grin. "The children." "I can see they are children," said the king. "Why were they here at the western shore?" They are here for your final surprise," said the captain. "The advisors wanted children to greet you at the end of the procession, to show that you are the father to all." "Well, they've greeted me," said the king in a snippy tone. "Now, let's get moving." Though the peasants and the children now walked upright on their feet, it still took 4 days to reach a village, due to the king still needing to stretch his legs and back every hour. Upon reaching the village furthest from the palace, the procession was abruptly halted and the king was called to the front. "Why have we stopped?" said the king. "We're almost to the palace." "See for yourself, Your Majesty," said the captain. The king's face crumpled when his eyes witnessed the smoldering straw that had once been the homes of the peasants. Fly-infested carcasses of pigs, goats, chicken, and cattle lay rotting in the sun, scattered along the path. "Even the crops are burned to a crisp," said the captain. "Foreign invaders must have returned while we were gone." "But my trusted advisors assured me there were no traitors or enemies left in the kingdom," said the king, crown tilted to the side. "Then a plague must have passed through here," said the captain. "What kind of plague is able to burn a village?" said an elder. "Perhaps my advisors burned the village to keep the plague from spreading," said the king. "Let us hope it has not reached the palace," said the elder. They found the same unfortunate scenario in all the following villages. By the time they reached the village closest to the palace, the desperation of the peasants could no longer be contained. Men broke out in a grumbling so bitter, the king had to clutch the jewels on his crown to keep them in place. And women erupted in a wailing so scandalous, the king hunched his shoulders and hid his face between the breasts of a big-bosomed blonde. "Make them stop," came his muffled voice. "Make them stop at once." "You heard the king," shouted the captain, followed by a crack of a whip. "Keep your pain to yourself if you know what's good for you." The grumbling turned into a soft murmur, while the wailing was reduced to sporadic and restrained sniffles. "Much better," said the king, coming out of hiding. "We all have to be strong in such difficult times. If my animals and crops are still alive, I will share what I can with those who stay silent. Come to find out, he had nothing to share. The stables and pastures outside the palace walls were full of livestock slit at the neck, pools of blood marking their gruesome death. And perhaps the king had forgotten, but all his crops and food products came from the field workers, and all of that was destroyed. "Find my advisors at once," said the king, as the procession trudged over the drawbridge and into the front gate. Knights spread through the palace grounds like a plague of locusts, shouting aggressively for the advisors to show themselves, crazed, hungry looks on their faces as they searched every room and every garden, every corridor and every tower, even the dark dungeon. When the search failed to produce immediate results, big-bosomed blondes bounced off the royal carriage and darted for a nearby garden to vomit the entrenched stench that had lodged in their stomachs for far too long. Musicians ran to a nearby wall and repeatedly banged their instruments against ancient stone, turning their instruments into splinters of wood, and vowed never to play music again. The nobility and the elders crumbled on hard wooden benches, their bodies feeling as if they had been ground into soft white powder and could easily be blown into the unforgiving wind. Peasants, used to hours and hours of hard labor in the blazing sun, accustomed to days of hunger and thirst, with their high tolerance of anguish and pain, stood strong at the rear, waiting to be dismissed. When at last the knights returned, it was with terrible news for the king, who had now thrown off his surcoat, silk robe and crown, and stood there in a simple undergarment that reached below his knees. "My knights have searched every possible area, Your Majesty," said the captain, "and have come to the conclusion that your advisors are gone." "Gone?" said the king, stomping his foot. "What do you mean, gone? I need you to find them, do you understand? I need you to place them right here in front of me. I need to know that my kingdom is free from traitors." "This is not the worst news, Your Majesty," said the captain, covering his face with his forearm. "Your treasure chest." "What about my treasure chest?" said the king. "I'm afraid it's also missing," said the captain, hunching down. "That's impossible," shouted the king, lashing the captain with the limpest of slaps. "My advisors are loyal, I tell you, completely loyal." "I can take you to your chamber, and you can see for yourself," said the captain. "Let me be," said the king in a whimper of defeat. "I will go alone." Instead of heading for his chamber, he made his way down the spiral staircase into darkness. 13 steps past the dungeon, mindlessly muttering, "Please let it be there. Please let it all be there." Cautiously, he opened the iron door, his upper teeth biting nervously into his lower lip. In that briefest of moments, nothing mattered more than his riches. The peasants and their burnt homes and burnt food meant nothing. His subjects and their hungry bellies and their battered bodies held no importance whatsoever. His only concern was that his gold, rubies, emeralds, statues, tapestries, and gifts from other countries waited for him, undisturbed and undiminished. When a soft, golden light illuminated his face, the greatest sigh in history flowed muscularly into the room. "Didn't I say they were loyal?" said the king. "My advisors had no interest in my wealth and power. I never doubted them for a moment." He entered the room expecting to rub gold over his unwashed skin, but immediately discovered that the yellow glow originated from a torch hanging from the wall. What was once a room full of jewels and gold now sat bare and hollow, and there was nothing he could do to replenish what had been lost. He suddenly felt naked and ashamed. "My beautiful, beloved statues," said the king, getting on one knee and lifting a shattered piece of marble. "Why did they have to destroy my statues?" He noticed a crumpled piece of cloth hiding in a shadow. "And what's this? Not my wonderful, exquisite tapestry. How could they?" He pulled the cloth into the light and jumped back when he found human feces piled on his royal image. "You sick, dirty bastards!" shouted the king, fury coursing through his bulging veins. "You will pay for this if it's the last thing I do." As he backed away, he tripped over a mysterious, soft lump. "This better not be shit," said the king, checking his boot. He bent over and sniffed the mysterious dark lump, finding no particular smell. He pressed on it lightly with his boot and found it to be smooth and soft. "Well, it's not shit, that's for sure." He then allowed himself to sift his hands into the lump and brought up a wad of human hair. "How was I so blind and stupid?" said the king. "How did I allow these damn horseshoe heads to fool me?" "Well, they're not horseshoe heads anymore, that's for sure. You can probably see their horns plain as day." Storming up the staircase with screams of rage, he completely ignored the cries of the prisoners, cries for a sickening mercy and a miserable freedom. In the presence of the captain, knights, elders, nobility, and a group of peasants, the king, in his sweat-stained undergarment, declared, "Those dirty, rotten devils have betrayed me. They took everything, I tell you, everything. But how could they have done it? Surely not on their own." He carefully surveyed the people around him. Someone must have aided them. That's exactly what happened. Someone, perhaps a certain group standing right in front of me, helped them steal my treasures. Peasants instinctively fell to their knees and said in unison, "We vow total submission to our king. We will wear his image on our chests and hang it on our walls from this generation to every generation that follows." "I can see right through you," said the king, "through all of you. You're all traitors. You wanted this to happen. You wanted to see me defeated. Well, are you all happy now? If I fall, you all fall." "Enough," shouted the trusted elder. "I can take no more." He then dared to raise his head slowly and steadily above the permitted angle. "Seems to me that with all this talk of invaders here and invaders there, invaders among the nobility, invaders among the peasants, that all along the real invaders were right in front of our faces, two corrupt advisors from a land down under." "What invaders do you speak of?" said the king. "Corrupt men, perhaps, but not invaders. I have a great gift, if you remember. I would know a foreign invader if I saw one." "Aha!" exclaimed the elder, head fully lifted to meet the king's eyes. "The real traitor is at last revealed." "How dare you accuse me of such a crime?" said the king. "Captain, have this man arrested." "Listen up, people, and that includes you, Captain," said the elder. "This mortal man we call king has betrayed everything we worked and died for, betraying our livelihood, our workers, our families, our commerce, putting his trust in strangers who cared nothing for our country. And now we have nothing. Our lands lay in ruin. Our families are broken. Corruption has robbed us of our dignity and made our nation the weakest in the world." "Why are you allowing this fool to keep blabbering?" said the king. "Arrest him and anyone else who takes his side." The captain and his knights took hold of the elder, but quickly let go once they saw the peasants rise up in unison, rows and rows of them, grumbling and wailing, men, women, and children with nothing left to lose. The king, in his dirty undergarment, suddenly looked like a common peasant, and maybe he was always one. But somehow along the way, humans lost their self-worth and decided that only a few deserve to inherit all the wealth and enjoy all the abundance from the earth. But not today. Not today. Eyes that once looked down now looked up and straight into the king's sunburnt face, folding the king into a crumpled old wad of flesh that should have been folded and discarded a long time ago. In unison, the peasants tore the image of the king from their tunics and chanted, with firm voices and collars pulled up, "Down with the traitor! Down with the traitor!" The captain and the knights stepped aside to let the multitude take hold of the king and pull him toward the tower that led to the dungeon. "Such disloyalty," shouted the king, "such disobedience, such dishonesty. You will all perish without me." Continuing with his useless tirade, the king squirmed and kicked, but was no match for the strength and anger emanating from the empowered peasants. When he faced the iron bars of the dungeon cell, he cried out, "You have no right to do this. I am your king, king of the peasants. Release me and I will share my wealth with you." "Your wealth was taken," said a broad-shouldered peasant, "as well as your power." "Traitors!" shouted the king. "You are all dirty, rotten traitors." Peasants shoved the king into his cell and locked the door, arousing cheers and applause from the neighboring prisoners. The applause turned into thunder once the peasants opened the doors and released a young scout, a nobleman, field workers, and mothers and fathers. The last one to leave the dungeon was the honest knight who was missing an ear, a tongue, and his hands. And it was he who witnessed how the rats rose on their hind legs and sniffed the dank air. They must have found the king's odor agreeable, for they scurried to his boots and stood there sniffing and waiting, as if for a ruler's command. Out of the darkness and into the light, the peasants and freed prisoners found the elders and other peasants chewing on peppermint leaves. "Where are the knights and the nobility?" said the broad-shouldered peasant. "Don't tell me they are still searching for the advisors." "When they saw you rise up against the king and take him to the dungeon, they got up and fled," said an elder. "Probably figured they were the next ones in line." "We would have imprisoned the knights for sure," said the broad-shouldered peasant, "for the unnecessary violence, but the nobility—" "The nobility aren't known for sharing their wealth," said the freed nobleman. "That's why they left. But having shared my cell with my fellow countrymen, I have learned much of their condition and their lives. I will therefore do my best to share whatever I have and keep it that way even in times of abundance." "Well, good riddance, I says," shouted a freed woman. "We don't need them anyhow." "But everyone must keep on the lookout," said the freed nobleman. "You never know when they might return and try to regain what they have lost." The trusted elder suddenly climbed on a large rock and addressed the elders around him. "Elders, let us be truly honest for once. We are to blame for what our people had become. We averted our eyes. We did not speak up for truth, justice, and compassion. We mistreated the field workers, the herder, the servant girls, the masons, the carpenters, villagers young and old. We became what the king wanted us to become, dishonest with one another, disloyal to one another, only to serve his petty desires. We all preferred to live in fear and submission. We surrendered our gifts to a man who squandered them. I pray that we never return to such foolishness again." "But who shall rule us now?" said a freed field worker. "What are we without a king?" "You are you and I am me," said the elder. "And together we are creators of a new kind of nation, one with leaders but no kings, leaders at the service of the people. And if that leader ever tries to silence our voices, make us turn away from his corruption, create intolerable working conditions, and forces us to shower him with gifts, that leader will be driven out and exiled for a lifetime." And thus began a new way of governance and a new way of living and relating to one another. The western shore and the western posts still had food and livestock, which managed to feed the villagers and council members, as the elders were now called, while they rebuilt their homes and created new fields. In time, villagers also became council members and soldiers, teachers and artists. Huts turned into timber-framed townhomes with workshops and bakeries and libraries. Villages turned into towns and towns into one big city. The city became so grand and successful that foreigners heard of its greatness and came from far and near, not as invaders, but as contributors of skill and knowledge. The original villagers and elders ensured that no matter how big the city got, when people spoke the truth, they looked each other in the eye, and this truth was spoken with firmness and compassion, and every gift was shared for the good of others. Though there were still moments of crime and violence, and pockets of corruption here and there, they were still proud of their city, for people did their best to live in peace and to respect each other's freedom of expression. So when the queen and the princes showed up, they did not know what to do. Should they immediately run them off? Should they imprison them? Or welcome them and treat them like royalty? "We do not come to reclaim the kingdom, if that's what you're worried about," said the queen, now silver-haired and covered in wrinkles and saggy skin. "We have given up our royalty," said the oldest son, "so no need for the royal treatment." "So what brings you to our city?" said a broad-shouldered councilman. "We come only to share our experiences if you would accept them," said the youngest son. "As you may know, we have been in the enlightened countries where science, medicine, and storytelling have brought great advancements and healing for humanity. But unfortunately, they have also been used to oppress and harm humans," said the oldest. "For this reason," said the queen, "if a science or a medicine or a story does not promote and protect every person's dignity and well-being, it must be stopped and moved in the right direction." "We thank you for sharing such words of wisdom and will pass them on to our people," said the councilman. "You are welcome to stay in our city for as long as you wish. The king's old chamber is now a room in an inn, and we can place you there until you find a home for yourselves." "Ah, the king," said the queen with a nostalgic sigh. "How is the old scoundrel?" "After the villagers rose up and imprisoned him, he only lasted 6 months in the dungeon," said the councilman. "By the end, he sat in his own filth and cried out, 'I am the king of the rats. See how they bow down before me. The nastiest and most contaminated are the most loyal. See how they bring me gifts from faraway lands. They are the ones who stole the gifts my family promised me. And now, at last, now that I am their lord and master, they return them to me. We rats all stick together.' It was a terrible sight to see him slurp on sour, slimy cabbage, gnaw on scraps of rotten meat, crunch on cockroaches and pop fleas into his diseased mouth. In his final days, dripping with pus and smeared with feces, he sat rocking and grinning as the rats chewed on his yellow skin. Look at how the rats love me and feed off of me. I am their king and always will be. Among the rats, there are no traitors. We are all loyal to the filth, the disease, and the darkness. So, we now know that the king is gone, said the youngest son. But do the rats remain? As long as there is filth, disease, and darkness, yes, they remain, but not in the public view, said the broad-shouldered councilman. It is our job then to keep them in hiding, said the queen, for even in the light they are still rats, bringing with them everything from down below. There is absolutely nothing to fear, said the councilman in a shaky voice, averting his eyes and pulling on his collar. The rats are under control and haven't been seen since the death of the king. Thank you, my friends, for listening to the whispers to the soul. When we raise our heads and look at the world, let us view it through the lens of love and compassion. When we raise our voices, let it be a voice powered by a love and justice for all. When we rise from our knees, may it be to proclaim a good news that unifies us and leads us to serving the least among us. May we clear out the hateful and dividing voices and find that gentle whisper calling us to live in communion with all humans at all times. If a story speaks to you from this channel, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. Subscribe to be the first to hear more original tales that you will find nowhere else.